Okay, so you want to understand how 1,104 Japanese prisoners of war attempted the largest mass escape in the entire Pacific theater of World War II. You have seen the movies about POW escapes. You have read the stories about tunnels under Stalag Luft 3, the ones with carefully forged papers and civilian clothes hidden under floorboards. You have a picture in your head. Here is the problem. That picture has no basis in reality. It is not somewhat inaccurate. It is fundamentally inverted. Because the Cowra breakout on the 5th of August, 1944, was not a covert operation designed to get men to freedom. It was a coordinated mass charge executed against a fortified military compound in rural New South Wales, and the men who organized it knew from the beginning that almost none of them were going to survive it. Before you can understand what happened at Cowra, you need to understand what kind of facility it actually was. A POW camp is not one thing. It is not the generic barbed wire rectangle from every war film you have ever watched. The Cowra complex occupied a site roughly 1 mile square on the outskirts of town, divided into 4 separate compounds designated A, B, C, and D. Compound B held the Japanese other ranks, meaning enlisted men and non-commissioned officers below the grade of warrant officer. It measured approximately 250 yards on each side. The perimeter wire was not a simple fence. It was a double barrier system, an inner fence standing 8 feet tall, topped with an additional 3 feet of barbed wire, and an outer fence of equivalent construction, separated from the inner fence by a 20-foot no-man's land packed with further strands of wire at ground level. 4 elevated guard towers stood at the corners of the compound. Each tower was equipped with searchlights and a Vickers medium machine gun, capable of firing between 450 and 500 rounds per minute under sustained operation. The population inside Compound B on the night of August 4th was 1,104 men. That number matters because the Japanese military code governing their psychology, the principle that surrender was an irreversible disgrace regardless of the circumstances under which capture occurred, meant that every one of those 1,104 men was already considered dead by the Imperial Japanese military establishment. It did not matter. The code made no meaningful distinction. What you need to understand is that the men in Compound B were not planning an escape in the traditional sense. They were planning a death with maximum disruption, and those are two completely different operational objectives. The intelligence reports the Australian military held through early 1944 consistently noted extreme agitation inside Compound B. The Japanese prisoners had received information that men over the age of 30 were going to be separated and transferred to a different compound. The prisoners interpreted this as a preliminary step before executing the entire population. That interpretation was factually wrong. Camp authorities were simply managing overcrowding across the facility. It did not change what the prisoners decided to do next. The belief that they were about to be killed was enough. Their response planning began within days of that information circulating inside the compound. The mechanics of the plan were developed through meetings held inside the barracks over several weeks. 3 separate assault groups were designated. The first would rush the main gate on the southwest perimeter using improvised weapons and attempt to overrun the sentry post. The second and largest group would charge the north wire carrying blankets, mattresses, and thick fabric collected from the barracks, throwing this material over the top strands to compress the wire and reduce contact points. The third group would hit the southeast wire simultaneously. The logic was direct. You cannot direct machine gun fire at 3 positions at once. Every man who reached the outer perimeter was a success. Every man who absorbed fire and drew it away from the others was also a success. The plan was not escape. The plan was dispersal at maximum cost. The signal was a bugle call at approximately 2 o'clock in the morning on August 5th. The prisoners had retained a bugle inside the compound throughout their captivity. The guards had not removed it because no standing regulation explicitly prohibited musical instruments inside the compound. That oversight cost 4 Australian soldiers their lives before the night was over. The moment the bugle sounded, approximately 900 men rose simultaneously and moved toward the wire. Not every prisoner joined the charge willingly. Those who refused to participate were beaten to death by their own comrades inside the barracks in the minutes before the assault even reached the fence line. 2 privates, Benjamin Hardy and Ralph Jones, were manning the inner gate between compounds B and C when the charge arrived. Both men were killed at their posts. The wire assault itself lasted fewer than 15 minutes. The volume of men pressing simultaneously against the north fence was sufficient to collapse sections under the combined weight of bodies and compacted material. Military records document that 334 Japanese prisoners successfully passed beyond the outer perimeter wire. Of those 334, not one reached anything that could be described as sanctuary. The surrounding terrain was open agricultural land in New South Wales, flat and largely without substantial cover beyond scattered eucalyptus stands and creek beds. The nearest township was Cowra itself, less than 2 miles from the compound perimeter. The maximum escape radius any individual prisoner could reach on foot before daylight was no more than 10 miles in any direction. There was no coast, no neutral border, and no sympathetic civilian population that could conceal them. The Australian military response activated within 30 minutes. Roadblocks were established on every sealed road within a 15-mile radius by 4:30 in the morning, using available forces from the 22nd Garrison Battalion combined with local police and civilian volunteers. The geography of inland New South Wales was, from an escape perspective, as close to a closed system as any location on the continent. Overnight temperatures dropped near freezing. The prisoners carried no food, possessed no local knowledge, and had no destination that offered any realistic prospect of concealment. Several prisoners died of exposure in the days following the breakout. Others were shot during recapture attempts when they charged toward the soldiers closing in on them, which was not accidental. Charging. An armed soldier who has ordered you to halt is a choice. Many of them made it deliberately. The recapture operation ran for 9 days. By August 14th, all 334 escapees were either dead or back in custody. The total death count reached 231 Japanese prisoners. An additional 108 sustained injuries requiring medical treatment. The death rate among participants was approximately 21% within 9 days of the breakout. That figure does not include the unknown number killed inside the compound by their own comrades before the charge even began. The 4 Australian soldiers killed were the only Allied fatalities. No civilian casualties were recorded during the recapture phase, despite the fact that escaped prisoners had passed through agricultural properties and at least one farm outbuilding in the first 12 hours. The physical evidence recovered inside Compound B after the breakout revealed the full scope of the preparation. Australian military investigators found stockpiles of improvised weapons throughout the barracks, baseball bats sourced from recreation equipment issued to the prisoners, table legs removed from barracks furniture, sharpened eating utensils, and lengths of wire fashioned into flails. Manufacturing of these items had occurred over a period of weeks using materials drawn from the prisoners' daily allocation. The stockpiling of blankets for the wire assault, the designation of attack teams, and the internal rehearsal of movement sequences had all taken place under daily observation by camp staff without triggering a formal response. The camp administration acknowledged afterward that intelligence failures in the weeks preceding August 5th were significant. The most documented intelligence failure involved a direct warning. Several days before the breakout, a Japanese prisoner verbally indicated to an Australian guard that serious trouble was coming. A written warning was also received through official channels and escalated to the camp commandant, Lieutenant Colonel William Staggard Brown. An assessment was convened. The conclusion was that the prisoners lacked the means to execute a viable assault because they possessed no firearms inside the compound. The possibility that 1,104 men carrying improvised clubs and blankets, charging simultaneously in 3 directions at a double-wire perimeter, constituted a genuine assault capable of breaching the facility was not weighted correctly against the warning received. That single analytical error determined everything that followed. The formal military inquiry conducted after the breakout identified 3 primary failure points. The intelligence assessment had treated the prisoners as rational actors operating under Western military logic and had not adequately modeled decisions driven by Bushido obligations toward honorable death. Compound B, at 1,104 men, was holding more than twice the population it was designed to manage, which reduced the observable ratio of suspicious behavior to total population. The overnight guard rotation numbers were documented at levels below what the facility's own operating parameters specified for a compound of that size. The Cowra camp continued operating until 1947. The Japanese dead were initially interred in a military cemetery adjacent to the compound perimeter. In 1964, the Japanese government funded construction of a formal war cemetery on the same site, which became the only Japanese war cemetery in the world maintained by a foreign government. The cemetery currently holds 523 graves across its maintained grounds outside Cowra Township.